You're talking about creating not a safe space, right? A safe space is where you go to not have to hear what upsets you.
There you go.
Right? This is a brave space.
And that's what
I talk about. That's what I preach.
I like that. A brave space.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Because you have to be brave. You have to be courageous enough to say, I don't have all the answers. I'm open to hearing what somebody else has to say, even if I don't like it. And that person's brave enough to share what they have to say, even if it may not be received well. That's how we're supposed to be working and operating with one another.
What up, Vigilantes? I'm here with Karith Foster of Inversity. Inversity. And what is Inversity?
So inversity is a new word for a lot of people. Inversity is the counter to diversity gone wrong.
Ooh.
And I say that because while people know diversity is a good thing, right? Having a diverse portfolio, having a diverse environment, meaning you're getting more ideas, more experience, people of differing backgrounds is supposed to enhance a program, a project, a community. When we're talking about diversity training, that's where it goes south. And it goes south because we're dividing people up. We're causing more division and polarization. And so the idea behind Inversity is taking what should be the real diversity aspects of honoring who people are, their background, their heritage, all the things that make up their identity, and expanding the idea of diversity to include diversity of thought and diversity of ideas. But shifting the focus.
That's a big no-no nowadays.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And it's also time to shift the focus from what separates and divides us, which is what traditional DEI does, to what do we have in common? How can we be truly inclusive of one another? But most importantly and powerfully, how can we be introspective? Meaning understanding your value and your worth, your connection to humanity, so that you can then see that in someone else. So we're working from the inside out instead of the outside in.
So in the crypto world, we've had a lot of experience with, this coming together of entrepreneurs from all over the world. And what I learned personally, being part of that, with crypto, was how you have to really emphasize the process of different cultures when they interact. Because one of the biggest issues that we have in crypto was not the technology itself that unites us, but it's rather how do we come to deal with issues and in how to have those conversations when times are tough. Right? So we saw a lot of, unfortunately, in crypto, a lot of this left-wing tactic of dealing with problems. We saw censorship. We saw censorship. We saw just name-calling. And to the point that the most predominant community in crypto, that's BTC, they pride themselves in being toxic. And I'm like, wait a minute. You want to be money for the world, but your culture is, owns the word toxic as if it's a badge of honor. And if someone doesn't think like you are name called, censored, everything that you have put on the internet is completely destroyed, and you are not welcome unless you fall in line with our way of thinking and seeing the world.
And these people are supposed to be the champions of diversity, right?
Yeah, well,
and it's not. It's like bizarro worlds. Like literally, the world's turned upside down.
Exactly, and so I see it personally. What happened really, and I'm pretty sure you and I would share this in common, is that I saw in Bitcoin history a co-op of social engineers that came in, and they divided the crypto community up to conquer us.
Yeah,
so we had a brain drain from this beautiful community. That people, a lot of the leaders were even pushed out. There was a man by the name of Mike Hearn, who was one of the most prominent developers in Bitcoin, and the way that he was bullied out of the community was that they hacked the ISP of the town, of the region he lives in, because they couldn't get to him in his house. So they hacked everyone in his town and his village where he's from. Yeah, so that's how hardcore this became. And I honestly think that this came from the same entities, the same people, the same establishment that wanted to create a very rigid, hardline, toxic environment in crypto to destroy this beautiful technology. So we could really use some inversity in cryptocurrency.
Well, that's what I do. And that's what I teach people to do. I teach people how to communicate better and more effectively. Because it's not just communication, it's comprehension, right? And if we're not open to understanding, comprehending where someone else is coming from, their views, knowing that this isn't about leaving hands, singing kumbaya, holding hands, singing kumbaya. This is about having a mutual respect and value for someone else, and that it's okay for people to have different opinions and different ideas. Like, that is what true diversity is, which you said is kind of the enemy of the people who want to control everything, right? Divide and conquer. That has been MO number one from the governments, from, various persons in power, because they know that if people really come together, they're in trouble. And if people really look behind the green curtain, they're in trouble. And so my role is to call, BS on all of it and say, look at the reality. I get to lecture at Stanford University, Graduate School of Business. I've been doing that annually for a while for a course on reputation management. And I was a luminary for the Knight Hennessy Scholars Program when it first launched, which is Stanford's equivalent of like the Oxford Rhodes Scholars. And while I was there was another gentleman speaking who was a scientist, a biologist, and he was there addressing the topic of CRISPR, which is very controversial,
right.
DNA gene editing, right? Now we're talking about mRNA stuff.
Right.
And I'm not a scientist, right? Or a biologist, but I was fascinated by what he was sharing, and I waited to speak with him after he lectured. And I said, I'm in the world of diversity, and I'm just curious, how closely connected are we as human beings? Like, what percentage are we different from one another so that we can kind of nail this down? Because I want to use this as a stat in my work. He looked me in the eye. He goes, Karith, we are 99.99996% the same. All right, we are fighting over 4/10,000ths of a percentage point, which really isn't even about like the melanin that we have in our skin or our hair texture or eye color. That 4/10,000ths of a percentage point that creates this, spectrum of differences is more like chromosomes. Like when someone has Down syndrome versus someone who doesn't. That's where that differential is. We are fighting over the nonsense, over someone's, belief systems, over who somebody wants to marry or sleep with. The stuff that when it comes down to it does not matter in the scheme of things of life and of survival.
Right on. So what advice would you give people that are entrepreneurs finding themselves amongst crowds that are outright toxic to their way of thinking, their outlook on life?
Recognize the toxicity, first of all, because if you don't recognize it, you can't address it, right? Like anything in life, you can't have a solution, you can't have an answer, you can't avoid it, you can't circumnavigate it. So you have to recognize what is toxic, right? How is this affecting me? And is there a group of people who also see it this way too? And not that it's about creating a tribe, but is gravitating toward the people who want to have the healthy relationships, who want to have the healthy career, who want to have a healthy environment where you're respectful. And again, that doesn't mean like you're in an echo chamber. Like, that's not what this is about. It's about understanding and appreciating the true diversity that is around you and avoiding the people who are out to sabotage that. So as entrepreneurs, the beauty of what we do is we're independent thinkers, right? If we weren't, we wouldn't have our own businesses. We wouldn't be out, trying to navigate the world by being creative and successful in and of our own right. And so that should be the common thread between all of us. And so when we do get into that groupthink and it is toxic, understanding that it's going to be harmful to you personally, to professionally.
So some people would counter-argue that it's important to surround yourselves with people that fully agree with you on everything, because you can take the conversation to the next level. Whereas if you are hanging out with people that disagree with you, the conversation stays very basic.
And the opposite is true. The opposite, I can get how people would think that.
Sure.
Because it's comforting, right? Who doesn't want to be validated? Who doesn't want to feel and be right all the time? But that's not how the real world works. And if you are shutting yourself off to differing ideas and opinions, then you're going to be stagnant. And any true good entrepreneur knows they don't have all the answers. This is why executives and CEOs, they have coaches. They have mentors. They go to leadership retreats because they know how much they don't know. And so if you want to put yourself in a position where you're only, surrounded by people who think and talk and, idealize the way that you do, then you're setting yourself up for not necessarily failure, but for certainly being stagnant, not growing.
Right on. So at the Crypto Vigilante, we took the initiative to make sure that we created an environment where the main analysts, the main co-founders, we don't agree with each other. We sit on opposite extremes of this Bitcoin civil war. And we did that on purpose so that we would have this dialogue. And I ask myself this question constantly because I would hear the maximalist toxic crowd say, well, you need very echo chambers so that you can grow that argument. They can grow in what your knowledge is. But what I've noticed with this experiment, because our environment is very unique in crypto, is that I am forced to listen to their arguments, even if I don't want to, and really understand it all the way. And they're forced to hear my arguments and the arguments of my crowd, and they need to understand them fully. So our subscribers end up getting both perspectives of the most contentious issue in all of Bitcoin and all of crypto, which is the civil war. And then they have a very, very well-rounded understanding as to like, oh, this is what happened. This is why Ethereum is the way it is now. This is why BTC is the way it is. This is the way Bitcoin Cash is the way it is now is because of this. Oh, privacy coins, Monero came into being because of these necessities that the market saw that were brought forth from the Bitcoin civil war. And this is how the smartest of people, in our opinion, satiated these needs from different perspectives. So it really created an environment.
And what you're saying is you're talking about creating not a safe space, right? A safe space is where you go to not have to hear what upsets you.
There you go.
Right? This is a brave space.
And that's what
I talk about. That's what I preach.
I like that. A brave space.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Because you have to be brave. You have to be courageous enough to say, I don't have all the answers. I'm open to hearing what somebody else has to say, even if I don't like it. And that person's brave enough to share what they have to say, even if it may not be received well. That's how we're supposed to be working and operating with one another.
Okay,
in
so
all areas.
You just got invited and welcome into the Crypto Vigilante crowd as a gift. I want you to be part of this brave space in crypto. I want you to come in and learn with us because this is an environment that we created with this exact intention. The intention of having this dialogue because we were at each other's throats for years. And we both sides got hurt. These were hash wars that were like billions of dollars each. Wow. Literally unnecessary.
Sure.
But it all came down for us because we didn't have I have many theories, and a lot of them are accusatory and sometimes conspiratorial, and they do too. We all have our own perspectives, but it's to this day, the vast majority of crypto is siloed into different cultures and different groups of people that don't communicate with each other.
Yeah. You know why?
Why?
Because the ego is running the show.
Is it also part of the zeitgeist of the culture that people were like indoctrinated into?
Which feeds the ego, right?
And this is very common in the U.S. especially. Like I remember like because I grew up both in Latin America and the U.S. And in Latin America, you really didn't have the segregation you had in the United States, even amongst classes. You had the seniors, juniors,
who are doing it in the name of diversity,
which is weird.
Right? It's bizarro world. It's opposite. It's everything is the opposite, right? Like the Clean Air Act, right? It's really about how much pollution we can put out there. It's linguistics. It's wordplay.
Right.
It's semantics, but it's also a way again. And God love us, we're putting it out there for real. It's a way for people to control us, whether we think they are or not. And this is the problem. We when I went in there and I spoke to that audience, I wanted to remind them more than anything of the agency that they have, and the fact that it is God-given, the fact that we are connected to Source, and we forgot that. And that doesn't mean like we are out there supposed to be running the show ourselves, but it means that we're all connected, right? We're all in this together, and we have been brutal is a strong word, but it feels brutal, like a brutal attack on our connection to one another. And it's been very intentional. So we have to be intentional back on how we are going to move past that and reconnect with one another in a healthy forum, in a way that doesn't mean you don't get your feelings hurt a little bit, doesn't mean you're going to be validated all the time,
right,
but you're going to be brave enough to hear what's being said and brave enough to speak up and participate. So I thank you for that invitation.
Thank you. And what's the biggest challenge that you find in our culture?
that people, again, don't understand their worth and their value. And the need to belong is so strong that they will look past facts. They will look past logic. That's kind of what's happening right now in the world of, dealing with the gender conversation, right? Like, I have many friends who are transgender, and some of them are actually, like, I have a very dear friend who found out that when he went in for a full medical exam, had one undescended testy and one ovary. Like, truly, and like was tortured growing up trying to figure out who he was and why he felt this way, even though he presented as a girl in the beginning. Like, so there's so many things we just don't know about each other, but there are also some things where people are being targeted for their insecurity, for whatever struggles they're going through, especially during adolescence. And we should love them, we should honor them, and we should support them, but that doesn't mean we ignore reality.
Right on, right on. Yeah, I definitely.
I know I just kind of went left field with that.
No, you're right.
But but that's just one example, right?
Yeah.
The conversation about race, right, or races. Like, I even hate that we use the term, like, what race are you? Well, there's only one race, the human race. What's your ethnicity? Okay, that's a good question. If you want to ask and want to know, and we should be curious. We should not be curious about. When we stop being curious about one another, that means we stop caring. The opposite of love isn't hate; it's indifference. And when we become indifferent, we become victims of society, right? Of this idea of not having us connected to one another. And it's exhausting. We are DEI'd out to the point where, and I love this quote by Vince Lombardi, fatigue makes cowards of us all. We can't be cowards in these conversations. We can't. And whatever realm it is that we are operating in, you in the, digital currency space, me and like with corporate America or with school systems, we can't be tired. We can't be cowards. We have to be courageous and standing up for honoring people and loving them. The word love, people think, oh, that's so, fluffy and ooey gooey. Like, what I love about the Greeks is they have 14 different words for love. Mm-hmm. There are 14 different meanings. There's, parental love. There's romantic love. But it's love of humankind, right? And that's something we have to connect back to.
What's the biggest challenge you've run into in your activism?
That I'm not angry.
Also, what do you mean?
I think there are a lot of people who are in the diversity space who want validation, who want correction in the form of vindication. And that's not that's not how you enroll people. That's not how you get people to feel included and to want to make a change and to be better people, right? I'm not saying that racism and sexism and homophobia, those things don't exist. Absolutely they do. Do they do on the level that the media tells us? I don't think so. But we also, if we want everybody to really participate in a healthy, thoughtful conversation that's about conscious empathy and noble compassion, attacking people is not the way to go about it, and that's not the way I do it.
Yeah, capitalism starts with empathy. You
Yeah.
really have to know what other people need, and you really have to understand them. You can't be you can't go into the market as an asshole, not caring about what your customers want.
Those are the people that go out of business.
Right? That's right. Thank you so much for your time.
My
And where can
pleasure,
people
Raphael.
find out more about you and what you're doing?
Sure. So my website is Inversity Solutions, INVERSITY Solutions. And my personal page is karith.com, KARITH. And I love taking this thoughtful message onto colleges, universities, and corporations across the country and the world.
Thank you so much for your time, Karith.
My
I
pleasure.
really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. Peace, love, anarchy. Thank you, guys.
let's do this.